America first has never meant America only, any more than saying my family first means that if my neighbor's house catches on fire and it is endangering, perhaps bringing sparks to mine and burning mine down, that I'm supposed to wait until my house is halfway burned before I do anything. That's not only facetious, but frankly, it's a very dangerous thing.
Today is Wednesday, August 19th. This is Boundless Insights, and I'm Aviva Klompas. For generations, evangelical Christians have been among Israel's most committed supporters in the United States. And that support has helped shape American politics and foreign policy and foster deep ties between Jewish and Christian communities. But the relationship is entering a new chapter. Younger Christians are coming of age in a very different political and cultural environment, and many don't see Israel in the way their parents and grandparents do. For decades, my guest has been one of the most prominent voices connecting American Christians with Israel. Before entering public office, Mike Huckabee served as a pastor and Christian broadcaster. He led dozens of trips to Israel, bringing thousands of Christians to see the Jewish state. He went on to serve as governor of Arkansas, ran twice for president, and became one of America's most prominent evangelical voices. Today, he serves as the United States ambassador to Israel. I am profoundly honored to welcome him to the show. Let's get into it. Ambassador Huckabee, welcome to Boundless Insights.
Well, thank you, Aviva. Really proud to be with you and looking forward to our conversation.
This is a tremendous honor. I'm very grateful for your time. Before we get into our topic for today, I was reading up about you, and I actually already knew that you're an incredible musician, been playing since you were a small child. I knew that part, but what I learned about was the name of your band when you were still in Washington, which was Capital Offense.
Yeah. Well, the reason we called it that, it was during my time as governor in Little Rock. And so most all of us in the band worked at the state capitol. Most of us were members of the staff of the governor's office. We had a few outsiders, but it just seemed like a pretty good name because we worked at the capitol and our music offended everybody. So we thought, there you go, Capital Offense. But we had a blast. We ended up doing a lot of things that most people could only dream of. We opened for Dionne Warwick and Charlie Daniels and 38 Special and Grand Funk Railroad, Percy Sledge. Oh, we opened for Willie Nelson as well.
Oh my.
We played 2 different presidential inaugurations, a couple of Republican national conventions. We played the House of Blues in New Orleans, Red Rocks Arena in Denver. We got to do a lot of things that most bands would only dream of. And I tell people it wasn't because we were that good. It's because we were the only band in America that was fronted by a sitting governor. So yeah, we got some cool invitations, but we didn't turn them down.
That sounds like a full-time gig. I don't know how you had time for the politics part of things. I think about your current role as well, because I see you all the time, all over the place, involved in every issue. And I really want to speak to you today about Christian support for Israel. People have long understood it to be a bedrock of the relationship between Israel and the United States of America. So before we talk about where the relationship is today and where it's going, I wonder if you could just help ground us by explaining where the connection actually comes from. Is this about theology or shared values, or is it something else?
Well, it's both theology and shared values. I like to remind my Jewish friends that if there had never been a Jewish foundation, there would not be Christianity, because all of Christianity is built upon the foundation of Judaism. We sometimes talk in cultural terms about the Judeo-Christian values, the Judeo-Christian foundation. Well, the fact is, it is the Judeo-Christian foundation that is the essence of all Western civilization, which is the underpinning of America. And that's why when I said a few months ago in a speech that had there never been an Israel, there wouldn't be a United States, there wouldn't be an America, people thought, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Until they went back and did a little study and found out that what I said was actually historically correct. And if one reads the founders, they quoted the Bible more than any other document, more than 10 times the documents that they quoted, whether it was from the Greek civilization or from Romans or from wherever else. The Bible was the moral underpinning of what would be America, as evidenced by the very first line in the Declaration of Independence, when Thomas Jefferson wrote that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator, not by their government, but by their creator, with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And in that one sentence, he encapsulated really what all of this Judeo-Christian foundation means. It is the worth and the value of the individual. That's a Jewish tradition. It is the revelation that the Jewish faith gave to the world, in that there is a God. He created us. We didn't create him. And there's only one God. There aren't a bunch of different gods. We don't get to pick and choose which one we like, because we find a God that sort of says, yeah, do whatever you want to do. In fact, the Jews rejected that in the time of the judges, when they said that that was a period in which every man did what was right in his own eyes. And that was considered evil. It also is the foundation of the belief in the individual, that not only are our rights individual, but our responsibilities are too. And so, therefore, our accountability to the Creator is individual. We can't say, well, hey, I can't help it. I'm a part of the plumbers union, or I'm white, or I'm black, or I'm brown. We don't get to make those excuses. We are individually responsible to God. So those are just some of the ways in which there is a common ground that Jews and Christians cannot escape each other. Now, I will say this, Aviva, sometimes I tell my Jewish friends, I say, because they'll ask me, what is it about particularly evangelical Christians? And that's because we are Bible-believing Christians. We believe the book, and we think that's where the truth is. And they'll say, why is it that evangelicals are so supportive of the Jewish people and of Israel? And I said, well, you got to understand, you can be Jewish and you don't need Christians to validate your faith. But I cannot be a Christian without the foundation of Judaism, which is the core of what it means to be a Christian. Jesus, in fact, was Jewish. The early church, they were all Jewish. They kept the feast, they kept the holidays. So it's irrational for me as a Christian to say, yep, I don't want anything to do with Jews and with the Jewish faith, with the Jewish tradition. That would be like saying, I really love who I am, but I don't ever want to acknowledge that I had a mother and a father.
One of the loveliest ideas in the Bible is the notion that each of us is created in the image of God. All of
Yeah.
us. And it doesn't say particularly the Jewish people or any specific people, but all of us, something that I think we lose sight of. Now, you spoke about facts and evidence and history, and all of those terms are having a hard time at the moment in 2026. And I wonder if I could ask you about an article that was in the Wall Street Journal not too long ago that alleged that Christians are facing widespread persecution in Israel. And you took to X and lambasted the Wall Street Journal. What did they get wrong?
Well, they got a lot of things wrong. I started by saying if they really wanted to do a study about Christians in Israel, they should have talked to me, because I am one. I go to church every Sunday. I play bass guitar in my church band. I've been coming here for 53 years. My first trip here was in 1973. I've been here over 100 times prior to becoming ambassador and moving here and living here permanently. So the idea that they have a better handle on what it means to be a Christian in Israel than I do, I thought was preposterous. Are there instances where Christians may be heckled or even spit upon? Yes, it happens, but it's pretty rare. It's not something that happens all the time to all Christians. I've never been heckled. I've never had anyone spit on me. I've had people yell at me, but that was in the US. It wasn't here.
It might be inescapable in politics.
Yeah, yeah, and some of it I probably deserved, so there's that. But first of all, let's just look at some fundamental facts. In 1948, there were 34,000 Christians living in Israel. Today, there are just under 200,000 who are living here. Compare that to anywhere else in the Middle East. Compare it to the numbers of Syria, Iraq. Well, Qatar, they've never really had many Christians living there. What about Iran? What about Saudi Arabia? Take any country in the Middle East, and you'll see that the numbers of Christians have been decimated over the past 80 years. In Israel, they have grown. Israel just did something that I find remarkable. They appointed, think of this now, the Jewish state appointed a full-time ambassador, George Deek, who is ambassador to the Christian world. He has full diplomatic credentials. Honestly, I don't know of any other country on the planet that has appointed a person to be an ambassador specifically as an outreach to the Christian world. I could go through many other examples, but the fact is Christians worship freely here in Israel. You don't have to have a secret society. There's a sign on the church where I attend that clearly identifies it as a church. There are multiple churches throughout the entire country. From Dan to Beersheba, you will find churches. and Christians who openly are able to express their faith. So this idea that Christians are under intense persecution, it is just defied by the reality of how those of us who are Christians live every day. And those rare instances, let me mention, Aviva, that those are universally condemned by every elected official that I know of, the prime minister, the president, the foreign minister, the mayor. Nobody that I know in a position of authority appreciates, endorses, or even shows a level of tolerance for that kind of behavior. In fact, it's considered repulsive. People who do it, if they are caught, they are arrested for it. So the idea that the Israelis are encouraging that kind of behavior is 180 degrees opposite of the reality.
Now, you spoke about the foundational bedrock relationship between evangelical Christians and Israel, but I wonder about the shifts that we're seeing, especially amongst younger Christians. Are you concerned about the way that you're seeing younger evangelicals or younger Christians approaching Israel?
Well, I have to tell you, I am, and it's alarming. I think there are some factors that have led to it. So many younger people get all of their information and all of their news off of social media, which is incredibly unreliable. So, if all the information you have about Israel or all the information you have about the world in general comes from TikTok or Instagram or from X or Facebook, uh, that's not going to be a very good or valid source that can hold up under scrutiny. I think it's also true that there's been so much Middle Eastern money. The Qataris, for example, have spent billions of dollars in the United States sponsoring Middle East study programs on university campuses, trying to indoctrinate young people with often a very Jew hating, anti Semitic, anti Israel point of view. Add to that the amount of money that is spent to sponsor and to push social media influencers. That's been a factor. And then I think the other, on quite frankly, the look at it as the other side, is that there's just a lot of biblical ignorance. There are many young people, even the ones who are going to church, who grow up in churches where the pastor is not really presenting a biblical understanding of Israel, its history, the Jewish people, and why that matters to every single Christian, whether they recognize it or not. The advent of something Aviva called replacement theology. It's not that prevalent in Bible believing evangelical churches, but it exists. It exists more in some of the more traditional, and I would call them liturgical churches, more institutional churches. And it's the idea that, well, God once had a covenant with Israel, but he no longer holds to that because when the Jewish people did not accept Jesus as the Messiah, he canceled the covenant and now he made it with the Christians. Well, on its face, that is a heresy and is defied by scripture throughout both the Old and for Christians throughout the New Testament. Second Corinthians and Romans in the New Testament tell Christians very clearly God hasn't broken his covenant with the Jewish people. And the reality is that if he could, which I don't believe he can because he's God, he is holy, he is immutable, which means he cannot change. He's not capable of having one thought and then having a different one. Then he would no longer be God. He would be like me. I can change. He can't. To say that God broke his covenant with the Jewish people would give me no hope whatsoever that then he would keep his covenant with me, a Christian. So I don't understand how people come to this conclusion that God is a promise breaker, that he does not keep his word. That defies everything there is to know about God from the scripture.
Given these two issues that you've pointed out, one is the lack of education amongst young Christians, particularly if they're getting their information from social media, and the way that theology is being presented and how that's changing and maybe eroding foundational values. What is it that can be done to preserve the relationship between Christian Americans and Israel?
A greater level of good education that would come not only from our colleges and universities and seminaries, but I would also say mothers and fathers need to take responsibility. Most older evangelical Christians certainly have a better understanding of our relationship as Christians to the Jewish people. That needs to be taught. It needs to be as much a part of the way we train up the next generation as it is to teach them to tie their shoes and brush their teeth, comb their hair before they go out for the day, and get their homework done, because it's an integral part of what makes us who we are. I think a second thing is that when we see lies, particularly the blood libels that the Tucker Carlsons of the world and the Candace Owenses of the world put out, we can't be silent about it. We have to speak out, and we have to challenge it with truth and with facts, because it's easy for someone to just believe a lie because it's repeated so many times that people assume, well, if it's been said that many times, it must be true. Not necessarily. The worst evils in the world happen because a lie was told repeatedly and no one corrected it and no one challenged it. We have to challenge some of these outrageous lies. And one of them is that Christians are not treated well in Israel, and they're not welcomed, and they're abused, and they're persecuted. That's a lie. We need to challenge it. We need to challenge other lies, like that Israel is a genocidal nation. It's absurd on its face. To say that Israel has been committing genocide in Gaza defies the reality that Gaza has actually had a population growth since October the 7th. The Israeli government provided vaccinations against polio to 1 million people in Gaza. Now, if you're trying to kill the population, you don't go give them vaccinations, and you don't pour more food in a humanitarian effort than has ever been put into any war zone in the history of mankind. If that's genocide, the Israelis are really, truly bad at it.
I want to ask you about more broadly this issue of American engagement with the Middle East. We're seeing increasing isolationism on the political right and growing contempt for Israel on the political left. So, what do you say to Americans who believe that the United States needs to step back from the region and end its support for Israel?
It may sound like a great idea. Here's the problem: America first has never meant America only. Any more than saying my family first means that if my neighbor's house catches on fire and it is endangering, perhaps bringing sparks to mine and burning mine down, that I'm supposed to wait until my house is halfway burned before I do anything. That's not only facetious, but frankly, it's a very dangerous thing. We need to recognize that, for example, our relationship with Iran. For 47 and a half years, they've been saying death to America. It's never been that the Iranian agenda was anything other than killing every American. They've said it, and they have killed thousands of Americans. And I think there are people in the United States who are oblivious to that. They've done it directly, and they've done it through their proxies, the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah. Hezbollah, by the way, is now in 12 Western Hemisphere countries. So Israel has always just been the appetizer for Iran, but the US is the entree. And their goal is to eventually do more than they did in 1979 when they took over our embassy, captured 51 diplomats from the US Embassy in Tehran, held them for 444 days, humiliated America by marching, frog marching those diplomats across the lawn of the embassy. I was married with children then. A lot of the people who are even in government today weren't even born in 1979. They have no recollection of it. So, in their mind, Iran is some place so far away that it doesn't touch them. But I would assure them it will touch you if it hasn't already. And it is a clear and present danger to the future of the United States and its freedom.
You arrived in Israel about a year and a half ago to become ambassador. You've now lived through wars, through Iranian ballistic missile attacks. You've lived through some of the most historic moments in Israel's short history. What have you learned while you've been in the role that you couldn't possibly have known from outside?
Well, I've not been shocked or surprised by the culture or the atmosphere. I've been here so many times. And so this is a place where I feel comfortable and, quite frankly, at home. And I have for all my many years of coming here. Maybe the biggest revelation, if you will, not as much a surprise, but something that has really been drilled deep within my consciousness, is the resilience of the Israeli people. It's quite amazing. Golda Meir said back in 1973, when asked after the Yom Kippur War, how do you keep winning these wars that you're not supposed to win? What's your secret weapon? And she said, because we have nowhere else to go. Israelis are a tiny part of the population. I sometimes push back on this notion that the Jews are trying to take over the world. And I say, really? You think that? Okay, Israel is a population of just under 10 million people. 8 million of them are Jews. That's half the Jews in the entire world. There are only 16 million Jews in the whole world. Put that in perspective, that's 0.05% of the world's population, not 0.5, 0.05% of the world's population. So if the Jewish people, representing a tiny, tiny minority, are so good that they are taking over the whole world, the banking system, the entertainment world, the military, science, if they're doing all of that with that few people, maybe we ought to hand over the keys. Now somebody will say, "Oh, there he goes. He's now voting for the Jews to take over." I say that tongue in cheek because on its face, it's absurd to think
It's ridiculous.
that that is what's happening here. But what I would say to them is, if you hate the Jewish people, take a good look. Come to Israel and see it for yourself. I can't tell you how important that is. You will find that this notion that Israel is an apartheid state is utter nonsense. I tell people, just walk up and down the halls of Hadassah Medical Center in Jerusalem. Spend 30 minutes. It's one of the 10 top hospitals in the world, according to U.S. News. So it's a major, incredibly impressive medical center. But here's why you would come to see it. It's not for the medical technology, which is amazing and world class. It's that if you walk the halls, this idea of apartheid will be completely destroyed because you're going to see Arab doctors, Jewish doctors, Christians working side by side as medical professionals. The patients are sharing the same waiting room. They get exactly the same coverage, whether they're wearing a hijab or whether they're wearing a kippah. And there's no distinction between who are the Jews and who are the Arabs and the Muslims. In fact, it's quite common that it may be that an Arab doctor is the chairman of a department supervising Jewish doctors. It's just the way it is. So I will say again, if Israel is trying to be an apartheid nation, they really are bad at that too.
Bad at genocide, bad at apartheid, bad at taking over the world, but good at some other things.
I appreciate getting an opportunity just to sort of give you a front row view of what it's really like here. And it isn't almost anything like what many of the Western media try to portray Israel to be. And I would simply say again, come visit. It's a remarkable place with resilient people, and they're very hospitable people. And they amaze me every day that with all the guns aimed at them and all the people who say horrible things about them, and who are seeking to kill them every day they wake up to live. They are an optimistic people, and Israel was recently named the 4th happiest country on earth, according to the people who live there. And, that's a head scratcher because you say, wait a minute, these are people who are dodging ballistic missiles the size of 18-wheel trucks. They're constantly dealing with everything from suicide bombers to the kind of hate that is living online and the anti-Jew sentiment across the world. And yet, in spite of that, they don't curl up in a fetal position up under their beds every morning and say, I'm not going anywhere. They get up, they walk their families around the streets comfortably and proudly, and they're not living afraid and scared, and they're the 4th happiest people on earth. There's something to be said for that.
It's truly astounding, really, to live through this amount of war and the seriousness of what is going on in the Middle East and still to be a country that is optimistic, that values family, that has a wonderful lifestyle, and that strives for peace.
Very much.
Ambassador, thank you so very much for your time today. We're grateful.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for inviting me to visit and have the conversation with you.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Boundless Insights. Whether you've been with us from the start or are just discovering our show, we're so glad you're here. If today's conversation sparked a question, challenged your thinking, or made you shake your head, I want to hear from you. Email me at podcast@boundlessisrael.org. Your feedback gives us ideas for new topics and new guests. And if you believe these conversations matter, there are 3 ways to support the show. First, hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. Second, help us spread the word. Share an episode with friends and family, post about it, or mention it in a group chat. It really does make a difference. And third, consider supporting our work. Boundless is a nonprofit, and we rely on donors to keep the show going. You can make a gift at boundlessisrael.org/donate. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep the conversation going.